In this video, you're not going to hear the pros and cons of Iowa, about Des Moines, none of that. This video is going to be specific about a couple transactional things that when you're purchasing a property in Iowa, specifically Polk County, Iowa, which is Des Moines Metro mostly, you need to know a couple things just to be aware of. It isn't things that are deal breakers. It isn't a reason not to purchase. It's not a reason to purchase. Just things you need to be aware of when you're purchasing a property in the Des Moines Metro. My name is Darson Grantham. I'm a real estate agent here in Des Moines, Iowa with Keller Williams, and we on this channel, we produce content that is about Des Moines, about living in Des Moines, tips about living in Des Moines, things you need to know but might not want to know, the cons about Des Moines or Iowa in general. We kind of give a broad overview of all of the areas in Des Moines, and we want you, when you're considering buying property in Des Moines, to know what you should and should not be buying, or at least help you educate to make that decision yourself. So in this video, like I said, when you're purchasing a property in Iowa, there's a couple things that you might not know, a layman doesn't know, and you don't need to know it. You just need to be aware of it when we go through the purchasing process. And the first is Iowa is one of the very few states, I think there's only one or two others, that has an abstract process, meaning when you purchase a property, you actually get a thick document that is all of the records of the sales of that property, back from the original owners. I used to live on a street where there was one big house at the end of the street, and it had the most cool abstract because it showed back when it was the house and all of everyone else's houses was just pasture. And it told that story, that plot story. So every house has one of these abstracts, which is good and bad. I don't know what good it is actually, except it's kind of cool nostalgia. The bad part about it is when you purchase the property, the seller has to provide that abstract and it has to get updated. There's a cost to that. It's usually paid for by the seller. You need to be aware of that and figure out who's paying for the abstract updating. If the seller can't find the abstract, this is a huge deal. So absolutely, when you're buying, make sure your agent is talking to the listing agent to make sure that the abstract is found and getting updated. Because if it is lost, it will take 3 to 4 weeks to be recreated, cost $1,000+. Although it's probably not the buyer's, probably not your responsibility, it's going to delay closing. So just know that when you are purchasing in Iowa, there is an abstract. Now, a lot of sellers don't know that they have an abstract, to be honest. It's kept at title companies. So there's 3 or 4 large title companies in the metro and throughout the state, and they'll actually hold the abstract for the seller. Maybe if you are a seller in Iowa and you don't know where your abstract is, call the agent that sold you the house, and if you don't know them, call wherever you closed the property and see if they're still around and see if they'll tell you. If not, call 3 or 4 of the large title companies and they will give you an idea of where that abstract might be. They'll tell you kind of where they've seen it over the years. So anyway, abstract, it's not online. It's a paper copy, super old school. No idea why we still do it. Don't know if there's any process change in the future, but needs to be, just not on my radar. Next on my list is we don't use attorneys in the sale of a property if there are realtors involved. If you're selling without a realtor, you do want to get attorneys involved. You'll need attorneys to look over the paperwork. The settlement companies will usually be an attorney that settles the property, closes the transaction, make sure the taxes are prorated correctly. Tax proration is another really weird thing about Iowa, so I'll get into that. And it's tough to really get into, but I'll do my best. So your attorneys really don't touch a transaction that is done by 2 realtors. So I'll have clients that are moving here from out of state and they'll say, what attorney should I use for the transaction? There isn't an attorney to use. If you use a realtor is going to set up the settlement. They're going to set up all of that back-end transaction, working closely with your lender to figure out that settlement statement, who handles it, who tracks it, who makes sure all of the numbers are correct. An attorney does not do that. The actual contract, because realtors usually combined and they're both a part of an association, there's a standard contract purchase agreement that two realtors use. So as long as that contract is used, an attorney does not need to review it. Now, if you want to have an attorney review it, you can have an attorney review it. Most that are familiar with the area and familiar with the realtor contract, they're not going to review it, or they're going to tell you this is really not needed, as long as there's no special clauses in there. The other part where I've seen attorneys part of a transaction are when you are negotiating. For whatever reason, I've been told, I've not experienced it, in Illinois, realtors don't do the price negotiation. They hand the contracts off to the attorneys, and the attorneys negotiate price. I don't really love that idea. It's not how I would want to handle it. I feel like I'm fairly decent at negotiation and making sure I can get, if not exactly what I want, at least, a little bit better for my clients than what they maybe initially thought. But neither here nor there. In Iowa, it's the realtors that do the negotiation. Now, always remember, you as the buyer are not going to get to talk to the seller. You don't go to the closing table with the seller and you don't sign on opposite sides of the table. You aren't ever with the seller. You'll never see them. In most cases, never see them. The realtors are doing that behind the scenes negotiation for you. The other thing you need to know about purchasing in Iowa, and I didn't really believe it until I started being an agent and buying rental properties, is the market changes with the seasons, which sounds crazy. You would think, house sales is a linear path, and maybe, interest rates change and it either goes up or down, but it's really linear. But in reality, your winter buying season or selling season is much different than the spring buying selling season. And in Iowa, because we have extreme weathers, you'll see that pattern. You'll see where the typical house, I say typical, it's tough to go typical because every house is a little different, but comps on a house that are sold in springtime versus comps on a house that are sold in wintertime, the springtime is usually way higher. Not way higher, but noticeably higher, and or the days on market are higher. So just know that when you're buying in the winter, or buying in the spring, or you're selling in the winter or selling in the spring, your sellers are going to get more for their house in the springtime, all other terms equal, where your buyers are going to get more value if they buy in the wintertime because the sellers aren't getting as good a deal. I've seen that for 2 years as being a realtor. I've noticed that very, very consistently. Talk to other realtors and they say the same thing. If you actually go back and look at the stats and compare December sales versus March, May sales, in most years, March, May is going to be considerably higher. So just know that. It doesn't mean you shouldn't shop in either of the times. Whatever's right for you. Just know your value of your house or the purchasability that you're going to have when you're buying is going to change drastically with the seasons. And last, and I touched on this earlier, the tax proration is different in Iowa. It's just a weird thing, and it's going to be really tough to explain. But what I want you to think about is when you are buying a property, you should get a credit. In most cases, you should get a credit on your settlement statement for the taxes that you're going to have to pay that the seller is going to give you money for. So that's where the term credit comes from. Likewise, as a seller, when closing comes, you're going to have a debit on the settlement statement. So you're going to have to prorate and send extra money to the buyers to pay the taxes for when they have to pay it the time that the seller owned the property. Again, this is really tough to explain. Just simple things. I would say as a buyer, just know you should get a credit. You should receive funds on the settlement statement for prorated taxes. Seller, vice versa. You should be planning to prorate and pay forward a portion of the taxes. And it's not for time that the sellers didn't own the property. It's for time that you own the property that you didn't pay. Because in Iowa, taxes are paid in arrears. Anyway, that wraps up the things that when you're purchasing property in Iowa, you just need to be aware of. It isn't things that are bad or things you shouldn't buy. You shouldn't, are deal breakers. You just, it will make your transaction process much smoother way to think about it and hopefully helps you sleep a little bit better at night. If you are looking for a realtor in the Des Moines area and you just want someone on your side to give you a very holistic, broad, not pushy point of view on what market might be best for you, whether it's the west side of the suburbs, the south side of the suburbs, clear up in Ankeny, or clear out on the east side in Altoona, or downtown in a condo, please let us know. We work with folks all across the metro because the commute time is, about 30 minutes no matter what way you go. We cover the entire metro and upwards towards Huxley. We do not go up into Ames, but all in all, if you need a realtor, please email us, call us below. We're happy to help out. Again, this video is meant to educate you, not meant to sell you, just meant to make your life easier when you do decide to purchase in Des Moines. This should make it better for you. Again, my name is Darson Grantham. I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams here in Des Moines. And until next time, see you later.